The dust swirled across the barren plains like angry spirits as Abigail Ellis staggered forward, her arms aching from carrying her 2-year-old daughter for miles upon endless miles. The year was 1875, and the unforgiving landscape of the Wyoming Territory stretched before her like a cruel joke, taunting her with its vastness while offering no shelter from the merciless afternoon sun. The hem of her tattered dress was caked with mud, her cracked lips bleeding, but still she pressed on, for stopping meant death for them both. "Just a little farther, Lily," she whispered to the child who dozed fitfully against her shoulder, tiny fingers clutching the worn fabric of Abigail's dress. "Mama will find us somewhere safe." Abigail had been walking since dawn, fleeing the charred remains of the small cabin she'd called home, until raiders had descended upon it 2 days prior. Her husband Thomas had been away when they came a small mercy that had likely saved his life, but left her to face the destruction alone. Everything they'd built over 3 years of marriage had been reduced to ashes, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back, her daughter, and the wedding ring she wore beneath her gloves. The distant silhouette of mountains promised water and safety, but they remained stubbornly on the horizon, never seeming to draw closer despite her determination. Her arms trembled under Lily's weight, light as the child was. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and thirst had long since turned her mouth to sandpaper. "Water, Mama," Lily whimpered, stirring from her sleep. "Soon, my love," Abigail promised, though she had no idea if she spoke the truth. The canteen hanging at her hip had been empty since midday. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, turning the sky ablaze with oranges and pinks, Abigail's strength finally began to fail her. Her knees buckled, and it took every ounce of her remaining willpower to avoid dropping Lily as she sank to the ground. She adjusted her daughter on her lap, brushing back sweat-soaked blonde curls from the child's forehead. "We'll rest here for a moment," she said, though she feared that if she closed her eyes, they might never open again. The sound of hoofbeats came so suddenly that Abigail thought she might be dreaming. She turned her head toward the noise, squinting against the setting sun to make out the approaching rider. Her hand instinctively tightened around Lily as fear surged through her veins. Out here, strangers could mean salvation or death, and she had encountered too much of the latter lately to trust easily. The rider slowed his horse as he approached, and Abigail could make out the broad shoulders and strong profile of a man silhouetted against the golden sky. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across his face, but even in her exhausted state, she could tell he was watching her carefully. "Madam," he called out, his voice deep and cautious. "You all right out here?" Abigail struggled to her feet, cradling Lily close. "Just resting," she replied, her voice cracking from thirst. Pride kept her from begging for help, though every fiber of her being wanted to cry out for water, for safety, for mercy. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his considerable height. As he stepped closer, Abigail could see his features more clearly, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, piercing blue eyes beneath his hat brim, and a weathered face that had seen its share of hardship. "Name's Samuel Pierce," he said, approaching slowly as if afraid he might startle her. "Most folks call me Sam." He glanced at Lily, then back to Abigail, taking in their disheveled appearance and the obvious exhaustion that had Abigail swaying on her feet. "There's a creek about a half-mile back," he said, nodding toward the direction he'd come from. "And my camp's not far beyond that. You look like you could use some water and rest." Abigail hesitated, weighing her options. Trust had become a luxury she couldn't afford, but neither could she afford to refuse help when Lily's life depended on it. "I'm Abigail," she finally said. "Abigail Ellis." "This is my daughter, Lily." Sam nodded, a gentle expression crossing his face as he looked at the child. Without warning, he stepped forward, and in one swift movement, he lifted both Abigail and Lily into his arms. Abigail gasped, startled by the sudden contact and by the strength that allowed him to lift both of them with apparent ease. She clutched Lily tighter, afraid they might fall. "Your burden is mine now," Sam said softly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Just for a while, at least. Before she could protest, he was carrying them toward his horse, a sturdy chestnut stallion that stood patiently nearby. "I can walk," Abigail insisted, though her body betrayed her with its trembling. "I've no doubt you can, Mrs. Ellis," Sam replied, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "You've clearly walked farther than most men could, but there's no need to walk any more today." With a gentle motion that belied his strength, he lifted them onto his horse, then mounted behind them. Abigail found herself cradled against his chest, Lily secure between them. The unexpected safety of strong arms around her nearly undid her composure, and she had to blink rapidly to keep tears at bay. "Hold on," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as he reached around her to take the reins. As the horse began to move, carrying them toward the promised water and shelter, Abigail allowed herself to relax fractionally against the solid warmth of the stranger's chest. She didn't know who Samuel Pierce was or why he had chosen to help them, but in that moment, with her daughter safely cradled and her own exhausted body supported by his strength, she decided that questions could wait. The creek Sam had mentioned came into view just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. The water gleamed silver in the gathering dusk, and the sound of it rushing over stones was the sweetest music Abigail had heard in days. Sam helped her dismount, still holding her firmly as her legs threatened to buckle beneath her. Once on solid ground, Abigail clutched Lily close and moved to the water's edge, falling to her knees beside the creek. She cupped her hand and brought the cool liquid to her daughter's lips first, then drank deeply herself, the water easing the burning in her throat. "Careful now," Sam cautioned, crouching beside them. "Too much too fast isn't good after going without." Abigail nodded, forcing herself to slow down. She splashed water on Lily's face, cleaning away the dust of their journey, then did the same for herself. The simple act of washing felt like a luxury she'd forgotten existed. "My camp's just over that rise," Sam said, gesturing to a gentle hill beyond the creek. "Got some stew that should still be warm and a place you can rest properly." "Why are you helping us?" Abigail asked, finally voicing the question that had been troubling her since he'd appeared. Sam's expression grew solemn in the fading light. "Out here, we help each other or we die alone. Simple as that." He paused, then added more softly, "Besides, no mother and child should be wandering these parts without protection." He stood and offered his hand. "Can you walk a bit now that you've had some water? It's not far." Abigail nodded, adjusting Lily on her hip and taking his outstretched hand. His fingers were calloused but gentle as they closed around hers, helping her to her feet. Once standing, she expected him to release her, but he maintained his hold, offering support as they crossed the creek on stepping stones. The campsite was modest, but well organized, a small fire ring with embers still glowing, a canvas tent pitched between two juniper trees, and a pack horse tethered nearby, companion to the chestnut stallion. Sam immediately set about rekindling the fire, adding small branches until flames danced upward, casting a warm glow over the camp. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a bedroll spread near the fire. "Rest while I see to the horses and get you both some food." Too exhausted to argue, Abigail settled on the offered bedroll, positioning Lily in her lap, The child was more alert now, her blue eyes wide as she took in their new surroundings. "Nice man," Lily said quietly, pointing at Sam as he unsaddled his horse. "Yes," Abigail agreed cautiously. "He seems to be." Sam returned with a metal pot that he placed at the edge of the fire. "It's not much, just rabbit stew, but it's hot and filling." He produced 2 tin cups and filled them, passing one to Abigail and setting the other aside to cool for Lily. The aroma of the stew made Abigail's mouth water, and she had to remind herself to eat slowly despite her hunger. As they ate, Sam kept a respectful distance, sitting on the opposite side of the fire. The dancing flames illuminated his features, the straight nose, the weathered lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, the watchful gaze that seemed to miss nothing. "Where are you headed?" he asked after a while, his voice breaking the comfortable silence that had settled over the camp. Abigail hesitated, suddenly realizing she had no clear answer. "Anywhere safe," she finally admitted. "Our home was raided 2 days ago, burned to the ground." Sam's expression darkened. "Raiders? Which direction did you come from?" "East," Abigail replied. "We had a small place about 15 miles from Fort Laramie." "Indians?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Abigail shook her head. "White men, 6 of them. They wore no uniforms, but they weren't simple bandits either. They knew what they were doing." She swallowed hard, the memories still raw. "I hid with Lily in the root cellar. They didn't find us, but they took everything worth taking and burned the rest." Sam nodded grimly. "There've been reports of a gang working these parts. Army's been tracking them, but they're elusive." He studied her face. "Your husband?" "Thomas was away," Abigail said, her voice catching. "He'd gone to Fort Laramie for supplies. He was due back yesterday." She looked down at Lily, who had fallen asleep against her chest. "I couldn't stay to wait for him, not with Lily, not with everything gone." "You made the right choice," Sam assured her. "A mother's first duty is to her child." "Thomas will think we died in the fire," Abigail whispered, the realization hitting her anew. "If he returned and found the cabin burned." "Fort Laramie's not far from here," Sam said. 3 days' ride, maybe less. I could take you there. If your husband's looking for you, that's where he'd start." Hope flickered in Abigail's chest for the first time in days. "You would do that?" Sam nodded. "Heading that direction anyway, got business at the fort." Abigail studied him, trying to discern what kind of man would offer such help to strangers. He wore simple clothes, a faded blue shirt, sturdy denim pants, well-worn boots, but they were clean and in good repair. The pistol at his hip looked well-maintained, and the knife sheathed at his belt suggested he knew how to survive in this wilderness. But it was his eyes that gave her the most comfort, clear and direct, with none of the shifty evasiveness she'd learned to associate with men of ill intent. "Thank you," she said simply. "We don't have much to offer in return." Sam waved away her words. "Not looking for payment, Mrs. Ellis, just doing what needs doing." "Abigail," she corrected him. "Please call me Abigail." A small smile curved his lips. "Abigail," he repeated, the name sounding different in his deep voice. He stood abruptly, moving to the tent. "You and the little one take the tent tonight. I'll sleep out here by the fire." "We couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," Sam interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "You need proper rest, both of you. The ground's no place for a child to sleep, and you've had enough hardship these past days." Too weary to argue further, Abigail nodded gratefully. She carried the sleeping Lily to the tent, which was small but clean, with a bedroll already spread inside. Sam had added his saddle blanket as an extra layer of comfort, and his saddlebag served as a makeshift pillow. "Sleep well," he said, stepping back to give her space. "We'll head out at first light." Abigail paused at the tent entrance. "Mr. Pierce." "Sam, I don't know how to thank you." In the firelight, His expression softened. "No thanks needed. Get some rest, Abigail." As she settled into the tent with Lily curled against her, Abigail realized it was the first time in 2 days that she didn't fear closing her eyes. Outside, she could hear Sam moving around the camp, the sound of his footsteps, a reassuring reminder that they were no longer alone in this vast wilderness. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Abigail for a time as her mind replayed the events that had brought her to this point. 6 months ago, she and Thomas had been so full of hope, working their small homestead, dreaming of the future they would build for Lily. Now everything was gone, and she didn't even know if Thomas had survived. Yet as the distant howl of a coyote echoed across the plains, Abigail found herself oddly comforted by the solid presence of the stranger who had appeared like an answer to an unspoken prayer. With that thought, she finally surrendered to exhaustion, sleeping more deeply than she had in days. Dawn broke clear and cool with a thin mist rising from the creek. Abigail woke to the sound of movement outside the tent and the comforting aroma of coffee brewing. Lily still slept beside her, tiny fists curled against her chest, face peaceful in the soft morning light. Carefully, Abigail extricated herself and stepped outside. Sam was crouched by the fire, tending to a small pot. He glanced up at her approach, and something in his expression made her suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Coffee's almost ready. Not much for breakfast, I'm afraid, just some hardtack and jerky. We can hunt for something better later today." "That's more than enough," Abigail assured him, smoothing her tangled hair with her fingers. "I'm grateful for anything." Sam poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and Abigail felt an unexpected warmth that had nothing to do with the hot beverage. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, stepping back to a respectful distance. "Better than I have in days," she admitted. "Thank you again for the tent." Sam nodded, then turned to check on the horses. "We should reach the trading post at Cottonwood Creek by nightfall if we make good time. We can resupply there and get word to Fort Laramie about your husband." The mention of Thomas brought a fresh wave of worry. "Do you think there's a chance he's looking for us?" Sam paused in his work, considering her question carefully. "If he's alive, he's looking. No man would abandon his family without a fight." His words were meant to comfort, but the qualification, "if he's alive," hung heavy in the air between them. "Mama," Lily's small voice called from the tent. "Coming, sweetheart," Abigail replied, setting down her coffee. She helped Lily dress and brought her out to the fire, where Sam had prepared a small cup of weakened coffee with plenty of sugar for the child. Lily regarded him shyly at first, then broke into a smile when he produced a small wooden horse from his pocket. "Made this a while back," he explained, handing it to Lily. "Thought you might like it." "What do you say, Lily?" Abigail prompted. "Thank you," Lily said, already engrossed in examining her new treasure. Sam smiled, and the transformation it brought to his face was remarkable. The stern lines softened, and his blue eyes crinkled at the corners. It was a genuine smile that reached all the way to those eyes, and Abigail found herself smiling in return. After a simple breakfast, Sam efficiently broke camp while Abigail packed what few belongings they had. When it came time to mount up, Sam lifted Lily first, settling her securely at the front of the saddle. Then he turned to Abigail, his hand spanning her waist as he lifted her with the same careful strength he'd shown the day before. This time, Abigail was fully aware of the contact, the warmth of his hands through the fabric of her dress, the easy power in his movements, the careful way he positioned her so that she wouldn't fall. He mounted behind her, reaching around to take the reins, his chest a solid presence against her back. "Comfortable?" he asked, his breath stirring the hair near her ear. Abigail nodded, not trusting her voice. It had been a long time since she'd been this close to any man other than her husband, and the unexpected intimacy of their position made her heart beat faster than it should. They set off at a steady pace, the rhythm of the horse's gait soon becoming familiar. Lily chatted happily from her position at the front of the saddle, pointing out birds and asking Sam endless questions about his horse, which he answered with patient good humor. As the morning progressed, Abigail learned that Sam was a former cavalry scout who now worked as an independent guide and occasionally carried messages for the army. He knew this territory intimately, pointing out landmarks and explaining the best routes through the challenging terrain. "How did you come to be out here alone?" she asked as they paused to rest the horses near midday. Sam's expression grew distant. "Grew up in Missouri. Family had a small farm. After the war, there wasn't much left of it or them." He shrugged, as if dismissing the weight of his words. "Joined the cavalry for a while. Seemed the sensible thing to do. Been out west ever since." "No family of your own?" Abigail ventured, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "No need for apologies," Sam replied easily. "And no family." "Never found the right woman, I suppose. Or maybe I wasn't looking." He glanced at her. "What about you? How did you end up homesteading near Fort Laramie?" Abigail watched Lily, who was happily arranging pebbles in patterns nearby. "Thomas and I married in Illinois 4 years ago. He had dreams of the West land of our own, a place to build something lasting. We came out here when Lily was just a baby." She smiled faintly at the memory. "It was harder than we expected, but we were making it work. The cabin was small, but Thomas had plans to expand it this summer." "It takes courage to start over in a place like this," Sam observed. "Or foolishness," Abigail said softly. "I sometimes wonder if I was right to agree to come, if we'd stayed in Illinois." "Can't live on ifs," Sam interrupted gently. "You made the best choice you could with what you knew then." His words, simple as they were, eased something in Abigail's heart. He was right, of course. Regret was a luxury she couldn't afford, especially now. They continued their journey through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they moved northwest. The flat plains gave way to rolling hills dotted with pine and juniper trees, offering welcome shade from the intensifying sun. Sam proved to be a thoughtful traveling companion, pointing out wildlife to Lily and ensuring frequent stops to rest. He seemed to anticipate Abigail's needs before she voiced them, offering water or assistance without making her feel weak for needing help. As promised, they reached the trading post at Cottonwood Creek just as the sun was beginning to set. The small settlement consisted of a sturdy log building serving as the trading post, a stable, and a few scattered cabins. It wasn't much, but after days in the wilderness, it looked like civilization to Abigail's weary eyes. Sam helped her and Lily dismount in front of the trading post, then tied the horses to a hitching post. "Wait here," he said. "I'll see about rooms for the night." He returned moments later with a frown creasing his brow. "Place is fuller than usual. Trail crew came through yesterday, took most of the rooms." "We can sleep in the stable," Abigail suggested, "or outside. We've imposed on you enough already." Sam shook his head. "There's one room left. You and Lily will take it. I'll find a spot in the stable." Before Abigail could protest, he added, "And I won't hear any arguments about it. Come on, let's get you settled, then we can see about some proper food." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed that would be just large enough for Abigail and Lily. A basin of water sat on a simple washstand, and a small window overlooked the dusty main street of the settlement. "It's perfect," Abigail said, genuinely grateful for the simple accommodation. Sam nodded, setting their few belongings inside the door. "Get cleaned up. I'll arrange for some food to be brought over." Left alone with Lily, Abigail took the opportunity to wash both of them as thoroughly as possible with the limited water available. She did her best to smooth the wrinkles from her dress and combed through Lily's blonde curls until they shone. A knock at the door announced the arrival of their meal, a hearty stew, fresh bread, and to Abigail's delight, a small pot of honey. Sam had arranged for the food to be served in her room, and he stood awkwardly in the doorway as if uncertain whether to join them. "Please, eat with us," Abigail invited, gesturing to the small table where the food was laid out. Sam hesitated, then nodded, removing his hat as he stepped inside. He seemed too large for the small room, his broad shoulders nearly touching the door frame as he moved to the table. They ate in companionable silence for a time, both adults watching with amusement as Lily devoured her bread and honey with enthusiastic messiness. "I sent word to Fort Laramie," Sam said eventually. "Riders leaving at dawn. If your husband's there, he'll know to look for you at Cottonwood Creek." Abigail's heart leaped with hope. "Thank you, that's more than I could have asked for." "Also asked around about those raiders," Sam continued, his expression growing serious. "They hit a place about 5 miles east of here last week. Seems they're working their way west. Did anyone?" Abigail couldn't finish the question. "No casualties reported," Sam assured her. "But they took everything of value and burned what they couldn't carry, same as at your place." Abigail nodded, relieved that no lives had been lost but troubled by the pattern. "Why would they do this? What do they gain by burning homesteads?" Sam's jaw tightened. "Some men just like destruction. But I've got my suspicions about this group. There's talk of a railroad survey coming through, looking for the best route. Land suddenly becomes a lot more valuable if it's on that route." "You think someone's trying to clear the way for the railroad?" Abigail asked, horrified by the implication. "It's happened before," Sam said grimly. "Wouldn't be the first time powerful interests used intimidation to get what they want." The conversation was interrupted by Lily, who had finished her meal and was now struggling to keep her eyes open. Abigail wiped her daughter's sticky face and hands, then settled her on the bed. "I should let you rest," Sam said, rising from his chair. "I'll be in the stable if you need anything." Abigail walked him to the door. "Sam, I don't know how to repay you for everything you've done." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "There's no debt between us, Abigail. I did what any decent man would do." "No," she disagreed softly. "Not any man would have stopped. Not any man would have cared for a stranger and her child as you have." Something flickered in his eyes, a warmth that made Abigail's breath catch. For a moment they stood in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken words. Then Sam cleared his throat and stepped back. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll find out if there's word of your husband." After he left, Abigail lay beside Lily in the narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the settlement, distant laughter from what must be a saloon, the occasional whinny of horses, the creak of the building settling for the night. Her thoughts turned to Thomas as they had countless times over the past days. She pictured his kind face, his gentle hands that had built their cabin and cradled Lily with equal care. If he was alive, he would be searching for them. If he was alive, they might yet rebuild what they had lost. Yet as sleep claimed her, it was Sam's face that appeared in her mind, those blue eyes that missed nothing, the rare smile that transformed his features, the strength that had carried both her and Lily when she could go no further. Morning brought a flurry of activity to the small settlement. Abigail woke early, dressed Lily, and stepped outside to find Sam already waiting for them, 2 horses saddled and ready. "There's breakfast at the trading post," he said by way of greeting. "Thought you might prefer something hot before we head out." "Head out?" Abigail asked, confused. But what about waiting for word from Fort Laramie? Sam's expression was carefully neutral. Got word already. Ryder came in before dawn. Abigail's heart raced. And did they have news of Thomas? Sam hesitated, then shook his head. No one matching his description has been at the fort in the past week, but that doesn't mean anything definite, he added quickly. He could be searching for you elsewhere. Disappointment washed over Abigail, but she forced herself to remain composed for Lily's sake. Where are we heading, then? Fort Laramie, Sam replied. It's our best chance of finding news of your husband, and it's the safest place for you and Lily right now. After a simple breakfast, they set out on the trail north toward Fort Laramie. This time, Abigail rode her own horse, a gentle mare Sam had purchased for her at the trading post, despite her protests about the expense. Consider it a loan, he'd said firmly when she'd objected. You can't ride double with me all the way to the fort, and Lily's safer with you on your own mount. The day passed more pleasantly than Abigail could have imagined, given the circumstances. The weather was favorable, with clear skies and a gentle breeze that kept the worst of the heat at bay. Lily, seated securely in front of Abigail, delighted in the freedom of riding her own horse, pointing out butterflies and wildflowers with infectious enthusiasm. Sam rode beside them, occasionally sharing stories of his scouting days or explaining the natural features of the landscape they passed through. His deep voice had a soothing quality that Abigail found herself enjoying more than she should, given her uncertain situation. They stopped to rest near a small stream around midday. While Lily napped in the shade of a cottonwood tree, Abigail and Sam sat nearby, keeping watch over the peaceful landscape. Tell me about Thomas, Sam said unexpectedly, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Abigail glanced at him, surprised by the request. Why do you want to know about him? Sam shrugged. Thought it might help to talk about him, and if we're going to find him, I should know what he looks like. Abigail nodded, understanding the practical reason behind his question. He's about your height, but not as broad in the shoulders, dark hair, brown eyes. He has a scar on his left cheek from a farming accident when he was young. She smiled faintly at the memory. He's gentle. Good with his hands, built our cabin himself, mostly. He was a schoolteacher back in Illinois, but out here he had to learn to be a farmer and a hunter too. Sounds like a good man, Sam observed. He is, Abigail confirmed. After a pause, she added, we had our struggles like any couple. The frontier is hard on marriages. There were times when I thought we'd made a terrible mistake coming west, times when I missed the comforts of civilization so badly I could hardly bear it. She looked down at her hands, twisted in her lap. But Thomas never wavered in his belief that we were building something worthwhile. Sam was silent for a long moment. And what did you believe? The question caught Abigail off guard. No one had ever asked what she believed, what she wanted. It had always been about Thomas's dreams, Thomas's plans. I believed in him, she said finally. In us. In the family we were creating. She glanced at Lily, sleeping peacefully nearby. And most days that was enough. And the other days? Sam asked quietly. Abigail met his gaze, startled by the understanding she saw there. The other days I dreamed of a different life. One where I didn't have to be so afraid all the time of Indians, of drought, of sickness with no doctor for 50 miles. She shook her head, embarrassed by her confession. It's foolish, I know. Everyone faces hardships out here. Not foolish, Sam disagreed. Honest. The West isn't for everyone, Abigail. There's no shame in wanting safety for yourself and your child. His words lifted a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Throughout her marriage, she'd hidden her doubts about their frontier life, not wanting to disappoint Thomas or appear weak. But Sam seemed to understand without judgment. and that understanding was like a balm to her soul. They continued their journey through the afternoon, making good progress despite the occasional stops to rest the horses and attend to Lily's needs. By evening, they had reached a sheltered valley that Sam deemed suitable for camping. As they set up camp, Abigail noticed that Sam moved with a slight stiffness, favoring his right side. When he winced while unsaddling his horse, she approached him with concern. "Are you hurt?" she asked. Sam shook his head dismissively. "Old injury. Acts up sometimes when I've been in the saddle too long." Abigail frowned. "Let me see." "It's nothing, Samuel Pierce," she interrupted firmly. "I've tended wounds before. Now let me see what's troubling you." Surprised by her authoritative tone, Sam hesitated, then nodded. He eased off his jacket and lifted the right side of his shirt to reveal a jagged scar that ran from his ribs to his hip. The skin around it was inflamed and tight. "A patchy arrow 6 years back," he explained. "Healed as well as could be expected, but it pains me sometimes." Abigail examined the scar with a practiced eye. The muscles nodded. "I have some willow bark in my bundle. Thomas always suffered from back pain, so I learned to make a poultice. It might help." Before Sam could object, she busied herself preparing the remedy, steeping the bark in hot water from their cooking pot. When it was ready, she soaked a clean cloth in the mixture and approached him. "You'll need to sit or lie down," she instructed, all business despite the intimacy of what she was proposing. Sam looked as though he might refuse, then thought better of it. He lowered himself to a sitting position against a fallen log, allowing Abigail access to his side. With careful movements, she applied the warm cloth to the inflamed area. Sam tensed at first, then gradually relaxed as the heat and medicinal properties of the willow bark began to work. "You have a healer's touch," he said softly, watching her work. Abigail concentrated on her task, trying to ignore the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers and the defined muscles of his torso. "My mother was a midwife. I learned a few things from her. She taught you well." Abigail glanced up to find Sam watching her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. For a heartbeat, they remained frozen in that moment, her hands on his skin, his eyes locked with hers, something unspoken passing between them. The spell was broken by Lily, who came running over with a handful of wildflowers she'd picked nearby. "For you, Mama," she exclaimed, thrusting them toward Abigail. Abigail withdrew her hands from Sam's side, accepting the flowers with a smile. "They're beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." Sam pulled his shirt down and rose to his feet, the moment of connection lost. "I'll see about getting us some dinner," he said, retrieving his rifle from where it leaned against a tree. While he was gone, Abigail busied herself with setting up their sleeping area and keeping Lily entertained. The child had taken to Sam with remarkable ease, accepting his presence as if he'd always been part of their lives. It worried Abigail sometimes what would happen when they found Thomas. How would Lily react to saying goodbye to the man who had become her constant companion these past days? And what about her own feelings? Abigail pushed the troubling thought aside as Sam returned with 2 rabbits for their dinner. The evening passed pleasantly as they ate by the campfire. Sam told Lily a story about a clever fox that made her giggle with delight, and for a brief time, the uncertainties of their situation faded into the background. In that moment, they might have been any family enjoying an evening together in the wilderness. As Lily's eyelids grew heavy, Abigail prepared her for sleep, settling her in the small tent Sam had pitched for them. When she emerged, she found Sam staring into the fire, his expression distant. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, settling beside him. Sam glanced at her, a half-smile curving his lips. "Not sure they're worth that much." "Try me," Abigail encouraged. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing upward. Was just thinking about choices, the ones that lead us to where we end up. Philosophical tonight, Abigail observed. Maybe. He was silent for a moment, then continued. 6 days ago, I was heading to Fort Laramie on a simple message run. Nothing unusual about it. Then I decided to take the western route instead of my usual trail. He looked at her directly now. If I hadn't made that choice, I wouldn't have found you and Lily. The implication hung in the air between them that something as simple as choosing one path over another had brought them together. It felt like more than chance, yet Abigail was afraid to name what it might be instead. I'm grateful you did, she said simply. Sam nodded, turning back to the fire. Get some rest, Abigail. We've got another long day tomorrow. She rose to go to the tent, then paused. Thank you, Sam, not just for finding us, but for everything since. His eyes, reflecting the firelight, met hers. You don't need to thank me. I know, she replied softly, but I want to. That night, lying beside Lily in the small tent, Abigail found sleep elusive. Her thoughts were a confused tangle of worry for Thomas, uncertainty about their future, and increasingly, awareness of Sam pierce his strength, his kindness, the way his rare smiles transformed his face. What kind of woman was she, to be thinking of another man when her husband might be searching desperately for her? Yet she couldn't deny the connection that had formed between her and Sam over these few days, a connection born of shared hardship and mutual respect. Morning came too quickly, dawning clear and promising another hot day. They broke camp efficiently and were on the trail before the sun had fully cleared the eastern horizon. Sam estimated they would reach Fort Laramie by evening if they maintained a steady pace. The day grew increasingly warm as they rode, and by midday, the heat was oppressive. They stopped near a stand of cottonwoods that offered welcome shade, and Sam suggested they rest through the hottest part of the day before continuing. While Lily napped, Abigail ventured to a small stream that ran nearby to wash her face and refill their canteens. She was crouched by the water when she heard a twig snap behind her. Turning quickly, she expected to see Sam, but instead found herself facing a stranger, a rough-looking man with a scraggly beard and cold eyes. Well now, he drawled, looking her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. What have we here? Abigail stood slowly, her heart racing. My companions are just through those trees, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The man grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Don't see nobody but you, lady. A second man emerged from the brush, equally disheveled and menacing. Pretty little thing, ain't she, Joe? Abigail took a step backward, her mind racing. Sam and Lily were only a short distance away, but would he hear if she called out? My husband is waiting for me, she lied, hoping to deter them. The first man, Joe, laughed. Funny, we been watching you for a while, ain't see no husband. Just you, a kid, and some fella who don't look like he belongs with you. Cold fear gripped Abigail as she realized they must have been following them, perhaps since Cottonwood Creek. What do you want? Well now, that depends, Joe replied, taking a step closer. Could be we want your horses. Could be we want whatever valuables you got. Could be we want other things. The second man sniggered, and Abigail felt sick with fear. She opened her mouth to scream for Sam, but before she could make a sound, the crack of a rifle shot split the air. Both men whirled toward the sound. Sam stood at the edge of the trees, his rifle aimed steadily at them. Step away from the lady, he said, his voice cold and hard in a way Abigail had never heard before. Now, mister, we was just being friendly, Joe protested, though he took a hasty step back. I saw what kind of friendly you were being, Sam replied. And I'm not feeling particularly friendly myself right now. So you've got two choices: leave now and keep riding, or find out how good a shot I am. The two men exchanged glances, clearly assessing their odds. Sam worked the lever of his rifle, chambering another round with a decisive click that echoed in the sudden silence. "We're going," Joe muttered, backing away. "No need to get riled up." "Wise choice," Sam said. "And if I see either of you again, I won't waste time with warnings." The men retreated hastily, disappearing into the brush. Sam kept his rifle trained on the spot where they'd vanished until the sound of their horses faded in the distance. Only then did he lower his weapon and turn to Abigail. "Are you all right? Did they hurt you?" Abigail shook her head, suddenly trembling as the danger passed and reaction set in. "They didn't touch me. You came in time." Sam closed the distance between them in 3 long strides, his free hand grasping her shoulder as his eyes searched her face. "I shouldn't have let you come down here alone. You couldn't have known," Abigail said, still shaking. Without warning, Sam pulled her against his chest, his arm wrapping around her shoulders. "When I saw them standing over you, I thought." He didn't finish the sentence, but his grip tightened. Abigail allowed herself to lean into his strength just for a moment. The steady beat of his heart against her ear was reassuring, grounding her after the frightening encounter. "We should get back to Lily," she said after a moment, reluctantly pulling away. Sam nodded, his expression grim. "We'll leave now. Those two might have friends nearby, and I'd rather not find out." They returned to find Lily still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger that had threatened. They packed quickly and within minutes were back on the trail, riding at a faster pace than before. Sam remained vigilant, frequently checking behind them and scanning the surrounding landscape for signs of pursuit. "Who do you think they were?" Abigail asked as they rode. "Part of the gang that raided our cabin, possible," Sam replied. "Or just opportunists who saw a woman they thought was vulnerable. Either way, I doubt they'll trouble us again." The incident cast a shadow over the remainder of their journey. Abigail found herself jumping at small sounds and constantly checking on Lily. Sam rode closer to them than before, his hand never far from his rifle. By late afternoon, the walls of Fort Laramie came into view, a welcome sight that promised safety after the tensions of the day. The fort stood as an outpost of civilization in the wilderness, its sturdy buildings a stark contrast to the natural landscape surrounding it. As they approached the gates, Abigail felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. If Thomas was anywhere, he would be here, or at least, news of him would be. Yet part of her feared what they might learn, and another part, one she was reluctant to examine too closely, was aware that finding Thomas would mean parting ways with Sam. They were admitted to the fort without difficulty, Sam's reputation as a scout and messenger apparently well established among the soldiers stationed there. The commanding officer, a Major Williams, greeted them in the central parade ground. "Pierce," he acknowledged with a nod. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon." His gaze shifted to Abigail and Lily with undisguised curiosity. "This is Mrs. Ellis and her daughter," Sam explained. "Their homestead was raided and burned about 5 days' ride east of here. We're hoping her husband might have come this way looking for them." Major Williams's expression grew serious. "Ellis, you say? Thomas Ellis?" Abigail's heart leaped. "Yes, that's my husband. Have you seen him?" The major nodded slowly. "He was here, madam. Arrived 3 days ago in pretty rough shape. Said raiders had burned his place and he feared his wife and child were dead." "He's alive," Abigail whispered, relief washing over her. "Where is he now?" A shadow crossed the major's face. "That's the thing, madam. He joined a party of men heading out to hunt down the raiders. Left yesterday at dawn." The news hit Abigail like a physical blow. Thomas was alive, but once again they had missed each other by a matter of hours. "When will they return?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Hard to say, the major replied. They were tracking the gang toward the Bighorn Mountains. Could be a week, could be longer. Sam stepped forward. Mrs. Ellis and her daughter need accommodations while they wait, and protection. We had trouble on the trail. Major Williams nodded. Of course. We can arrange quarters for them. He turned to Abigail. You'll be safe here, madam, and we'll send word to your husband as soon as possible. The reality of the situation settled over Abigail as they were shown to the quarters assigned to them, a small but comfortable room in the officers' section of the fort. Lily, excited by the new surroundings and the presence of soldiers, chattered happily as they settled in, but Abigail's thoughts were elsewhere. Thomas was alive. The knowledge should have brought nothing but joy, yet it was complicated by the realization that they faced more days of separation and uncertainty. And there was Sam. What would happen now? That question was answered sooner than she expected. After ensuring they were comfortably settled, Sam lingered at the door of their quarters. Major Williams has asked me to join the party tracking the raiders, he said without preamble. I'll be leaving at first light. Abigail stared at him, absorbing the implications. You're going after Thomas. Sam nodded. The major thinks I can help them. I know the territory better than most. When will you return? The question slipped out before Abigail could consider its presumption. A fleeting expression crossed Sam's face, something like regret, quickly masked. Can't say for certain. Depends on how the tracking goes. Abigail nodded, fighting an unexpected sense of loss. Of course. You've already done more than enough for us. Sam took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it and stopped. You and Lily will be safe here until your husband returns. The fort's well protected, and the major has assigned a soldier to look out for you specifically. Thank you, Abigail said softly, for everything. Sam's gaze held hers for a long moment. Take care of yourself, Abigail, and Lily too. Then he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him. Abigail stood motionless, a strange hollowness expanding in her chest. It was ridiculous to feel this way. Sam had been part of their lives for less than a week, yet his absence already felt like a physical ache. Where's Sam going, Mama? Lily asked, looking up from the wooden horse he had given her. Abigail knelt beside her daughter, smoothing back her curls. He's going to find Papa for us. Lily's face brightened. Papa's coming back. Yes, sweetheart, Abigail assured her, forcing a smile. Soon we'll all be together again. That night, lying awake in the unfamiliar room, Abigail tried to sort through her confused emotions. She should be focusing on Thomas, on the miracle of his survival and their eventual reunion. Instead, her thoughts kept returning to Sam, his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness with Lily, the way his rare smiles transformed his face. What kind of woman was she, to be thinking of another man when her husband was risking his life to avenge what he thought was her death? Guilt mingled with her confusion, making sleep impossible. The days at Fort Laramie passed slowly. Abigail and Lily settled into a routine of sorts, taking meals in the officers' mess, and spending their days exploring the fort under the watchful eye of Private Jenkins, the young soldier assigned to their protection. The military community was welcoming, particularly the few officers' wives stationed there, who were delighted to have another woman and child to fuss over. A week passed with no word from either Thomas or the tracking party. Abigail tried to keep her spirits up for Lily's sake, but as each day ended without news, anxiety gnawed at her. Had something happened to the tracking party? Were Thomas and Sam in danger? On the 8th day, as Abigail was helping Lily practice her letters in their quarters, a commotion outside drew her attention. The sound of horses and men's voices filtered through the open window, and Lily abandoned her slate to rush to the door. Is it Papa? she asked excitedly. "Let's see," Abigail replied, her heart racing as she followed Lily outside. The central parade ground was filled with returning riders, dusty and weary from the trail. Abigail scanned the faces anxiously, looking for Thomas or Sam among them. It took her a moment to spot them, Thomas dismounting near the officers' quarters, Sam a few feet away, helping a wounded man from his horse. "Thomas," she called, her voice breaking with emotion. He turned at the sound, his face freezing in disbelief as he saw her. For a heartbeat, he stood motionless, as if afraid she might vanish if he moved. Then he was running toward her, and Abigail found herself swept into an embrace so tight it nearly robbed her of breath. "Abigail," he whispered against her hair. "My God, you're alive. You're both alive." Lily tugged at his leg, and Thomas dropped to his knees, gathering his daughter into his arms with a sob that tore at Abigail's heart. "My little girl," he murmured, pressing kisses to Lily's face as she giggled and patted his beard. Over Thomas's shoulder, Abigail caught sight of Sam watching them from a distance. Their eyes met briefly before he turned away, leading his horse toward the stables. The reunion with Thomas was everything it should have been: emotional, joyful, a miracle after days of uncertainty and fear. As they returned to their quarters, Thomas couldn't stop touching them, as if to reassure himself that they were truly there. He listened in horror as Abigail recounted the raid on their cabin and their desperate flight across the plains. "When I returned and found the cabin burned, I thought I'd lost you both," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've never known such despair." "We were fortunate," Abigail replied, "if Sam hadn't found us when he did." Thomas nodded, his expression solemn. "Pierce told me how he found you. I owe him a debt I can never repay." "He saved us," Abigail agreed softly. "More than once," Thomas added. "He's a remarkable man. On the trail, tracking those raiders, he was tireless. Even when the rest of us were ready to give up, he insisted we continue." Thomas shook his head in admiration. "And he was right. We found them yesterday. 3 of the 6, at least." "You caught them?" Abigail asked, a chill running through her at the thought of confronting the men who had destroyed their home. Thomas's expression hardened. "They won't be troubling anyone else. There was a fight when we tried to take them in. 2 died. The 3rd is wounded but will stand trial." Abigail nodded, unable to feel much regret for the fate of men who had caused so much suffering. "And the others, still out there somewhere," Thomas replied. "But with their gang broken, they may move on to easier territory." That evening, the officers of the fort hosted a small celebration in honor of the successful mission and the Ellis family's reunion. The mess hall was transformed with extra lanterns, and what decorations could be managed in such a remote outpost? Abigail wore her one good dress, carefully unpacked from the bundle she'd carried from their burning cabin, and Thomas had borrowed a clean shirt from one of the officers. Sam arrived late, freshly shaved and wearing a dark coat that Abigail had never seen before. He moved through the gathering with quiet reserve, accepting congratulations from the other men but clearly uncomfortable with the attention. When he approached Abigail and Thomas, there was a formality to his manner that hadn't been there during their days on the trail. "Mrs. Ellis," he greeted her with a slight bow. "Mr. Ellis, I'm glad to see your family reunited." "Thanks to you," Thomas replied warmly, extending his hand. "I can never express my gratitude adequately, Pierce. You saved my family when I couldn't." Sam accepted the handshake but shook his head. "Your wife is a remarkable woman, Ellis. She kept herself and your daughter alive under circumstances that would have broken many." "I merely provided transportation." "You did far more than that," Abigail interjected, meeting Sam's gaze directly. "You gave us hope when we had none." Something flickered in Sam's eyes, a warmth quickly banked. "It was my honor to help," he said simply. Lily, who had been playing with the other children at the far end of the mess hall, spotted Sam and came running over. "Sam!" she cried, launching herself at him with complete trust that he would catch her. And he did, sweeping her up with a natural ease that brought a smile to his usually serious face. "Hello, little one. Having fun?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, then presented him with a slightly crushed wildflower. "For you," she declared, "because you found Papa for us." Sam accepted the flower with grave courtesy. "Thank you, Miss Lily. It's beautiful." The simple interaction tightened Abigail's throat with emotion. In less than 2 weeks, this man had become so important to both her and Lily, and soon he would be gone from their lives. As if reading her thoughts, Sam set Lily down gently and turned to Thomas. "I'll be heading out at first light. Major Williams has messages that need delivering to Fort Fetterman." Thomas nodded. "Will you return this way?" Sam shook his head. "Not for some time. The Major has assignments for me farther north." "Where will you go after that?" Abigail asked, unable to stop herself. Sam's gaze shifted to her. "Wherever the trail leads, I suppose." The evening continued with music provided by a soldier with a fiddle and another with a harmonica. Thomas, in high spirits, pulled Abigail into a lively dance, and for a time she lost herself in the joy of being reunited with her husband. Yet her eyes occasionally sought out Sam, who stood quietly at the edge of the gathering, watching the festivities with a distant expression. As the celebration wound down, Thomas was drawn into conversation with Major Williams about their plans. The destruction of their homestead meant they needed to start over, and the Major was suggesting possibilities for a new beginning. Finding herself momentarily alone, Abigail approached Sam, who was preparing to leave. "I wanted to say goodbye properly," she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "And thank you once more." Sam studied her face in the lantern light. "You don't need to thank me, Abigail." "I know," she replied with a small smile. "You've said that before, but I want to." He nodded, accepting her gratitude with characteristic reserve. Then, surprising her, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a carved wooden horse, similar to the one he had given Lily but more intricately detailed. "I made this while we were tracking," he said, holding it out to her. "Thought you might like to have something to remember our journey by." Abigail accepted the carving, touched beyond words by the unexpected gift. The tiny horse was exquisitely crafted, with flowing mane and tail and a sense of movement captured in the curve of its body. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you." Sam's fingers brushed hers as she took the carving, the brief contact sending a jolt of awareness through her. Their eyes met, and for a moment, all the words they couldn't say seemed to hang in the air between them. "Be happy, Abigail," Sam said finally, his voice rough with emotion he rarely displayed. "You deserve it." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing through the mess hall doors into the night beyond. Abigail stood motionless, the wooden horse clutched in her hand, a strange mixture of gratitude and loss washing over her. Thomas found her there a few minutes later, still staring at the door through which Sam had vanished. "Everything all right?" he asked, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Abigail nodded, tucking the carving into her pocket. "Yes, just saying goodbye to Sam. He's leaving in the morning." Thomas's expression was thoughtful. "He's not a man who stays in one place long, from what I gather. The open country suits him." "Yes," Abigail agreed quietly. "I suppose it does." The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect day for traveling. Abigail rose early, unable to sleep once she remembered that Sam would be departing. She told herself she merely wanted to ensure Lily had a chance to say goodbye, but in her heart, she knew there was more to it than that. They found Sam at the stables, already saddling his horse for the journey. He looked up as they approached, surprise briefly crossing his features before he composed them into his usual calm expression. "Didn't expect to see you folks this early," he said, straightening up from checking his saddle girth. "Lily wanted to say goodbye," Abigail explained, though the child was still half asleep in her arms. Sam's expression softened as he looked at Lily. "Take care of your mama and papa, little one," he said, gently touching her cheek. Lily roused herself enough to reach for him, and Abigail transferred her into Sam's arms. The child wrapped her arms around his neck in a sleepy hug that seemed to startle him momentarily before he returned it with careful tenderness. "Will you come back to see us?" Lily asked as he set her down. Sam glanced at Abigail, then back to Lily. "If the trail brings me your way, I'll be sure to stop and see how you're growing." It wasn't a promise, Abigail knew, but it was the most he could offer. The life of a scout and messenger was unpredictable, with no certainty of where he might be from one month to the next. "Safe travels, Sam," she said as he mounted his horse. He looked down at her, his blue eyes holding hers for a long moment. "Take care of yourself, Abigail." Then he was gone, riding through the fort gates as the morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground. Abigail watched until he disappeared from sight, Lily's small hand clasped in hers. "He'll be back, Mama," Lily said with the simple confidence of childhood. Abigail squeezed her daughter's hand. "Perhaps he will, sweetheart." The weeks that followed were busy ones for the Ellis family. With their homestead destroyed, they faced the challenge of starting over completely. Major Williams, impressed by Thomas's education, offered him a position as clerk and unofficial schoolmaster for the children at the fort, a role that would provide them with steady income and safe housing while they decided on their next steps. Abigail found herself adapting to life at the fort with surprising ease. The community was close-knit and supportive, and she soon made friends among the officers' wives. Her skills as a healer, limited though they were, proved valuable in a place where the nearest doctor was days away, and she often assisted when soldiers returned injured from patrols. Thomas thrived in his new role, his natural aptitude for teaching finding an outlet in the small school he established for the fort's children. The destruction of their homestead had changed him in subtle ways. He was less driven by dreams of independence, more content with the security and community the fort provided. "Perhaps this is where we were meant to be all along," he commented one evening as they sat outside their quarters, watching Lily play with the other children in the fading light. "Not isolated on a homestead, but here, where we can be useful." Abigail nodded, seeing the wisdom in his words. The raid that had seemed like the end of everything had, in many ways, opened a door to a new beginning, one that offered advantages their remote cabin never could. Yet, despite the contentment of their new life, Abigail occasionally found herself thinking of Sam Pierce. On quiet evenings, she would take out the wooden horse he had carved for her, running her fingers over its smooth contours and wondering where he might be, what trails he might be riding. She kept the carving hidden not out of deception, but because it represented something private, a connection to a man who had come into her life at its darkest moment and carried her burden when she could carry it no longer. Summer faded into autumn, and autumn gave way to the first snows of winter. Fort Laramie prepared for the cold months ahead, stockpiling supplies and reducing patrols as the weather grew harsher. Abigail found herself unexpectedly anticipating the season. Winter at the fort promised to be far less isolating than it would have been at their remote cabin. It was on a crisp December morning, with snow dusting the parade ground and smoke rising from every chimney in the fort, that Sam Pierce returned. Abigail was helping Thomas organize books for the school when Lily burst into the room, her face alight with excitement. "Mama, Papa, Sam's back!" she exclaimed, practically bouncing with joy. Thomas looked up from his work, a smile spreading across his face. "Well now, that's good news. Where is he?" "At the gates. He's talking to Major Williams," Lily reported, tugging at Abigail's hand. "Come see." Abigail allowed herself to be pulled outside, her heart beating faster than it should at the prospect of seeing Sam again. Thomas followed more sedately, amused by his daughter's enthusiasm. Sam stood near the major's office, his tall figure unmistakable even from a distance. He looked much as Abigail remembered him, perhaps a bit leaner, with his beard grown slightly longer against the winter cold. He was engaged in conversation with Major Williams, his expression serious as he delivered what appeared to be a report. Lily broke free from Abigail's grasp and ran toward him, calling his name. Sam turned at the sound, and the transformation that came over his face at the sight of the child running toward him was remarkable. The serious lines melted away, replaced by a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He crouched down to catch Lily as she launched herself at him, lifting her easily and spinning her around once before setting her back on her feet. "Look at you," he said, his deep voice carrying across the space between them. "You've grown since I saw you last. A whole inch." Lily informed him proudly. "Papa measured me on the wall." By then, Abigail and Thomas had reached them. Sam straightened, his gaze moving from Lily to her parents, lingering for just a moment on Abigail's face before shifting to Thomas. "Ellis," he greeted, extending his hand. "Good to see you." Thomas shook his hand warmly. "And you, Pierce. Lily's talked about you nearly every day since you left." Sam's expression softened as he glanced down at the child. "Has she now? You promised to come back," Lily reminded him seriously. "And you did." "So I did," Sam agreed, his gaze lifting to meet Abigail's. "Welcome back, Sam," she said softly, finding herself unexpectedly emotional at seeing him again. He nodded, something in his eyes suggesting he felt the same complexity of emotions. "Thank you, Mrs. Ellis." The formality of his address was a reminder of the distance that now existed between them, no longer the intimate companions of their journey, but acquaintances reuniting after months apart. Thomas, oblivious to the undercurrents, clapped Sam on the shoulder. "You must join us for dinner tonight. We have much to catch up on, and I still owe you a proper thank you for saving my family." Sam hesitated, glancing at Abigail as if seeking her permission. She nodded slightly, and he turned back to Thomas. "I'd be honored." That evening, Sam arrived at their quarters promptly, a bottle of whiskey in one hand and a small package in the other. He had cleaned up from his journey, his hair still damp from washing and his beard neatly trimmed. He wore a clean shirt under his worn coat, and Abigail was struck anew by the quiet dignity he carried regardless of circumstances. Lily claimed his attention immediately, showing him her slate with the letters she had learned to write and the small collection of treasures she had accumulated during their time at the fort. Sam listened with patient interest, treating each childish accomplishment with the seriousness it deserved in Lily's eyes. The dinner was simple but plentiful. A stew Abigail had prepared, fresh bread from the fort's bakery, and preserved fruits that were a luxury in the winter months. As they ate, Thomas drew Sam into conversation about his travels since they had last seen him. "Been as far north as the Yellowstone," Sam told them, his deep voice filling their small quarters, carrying dispatches between the forts and checking on conditions for potential new outposts. "Sounds like dangerous work," Thomas observed. "Especially in these winter months." Sam shrugged. "It has its moments, but the country up there, it's something to see. Valleys so green they hurt your eyes in summer, mountains that seem to touch the sky." Abigail, listening to his description, could almost see the landscapes he spoke of, wild, untamed places far from civilization. It struck her that those places suited Sam, that perhaps he needed the open country in the same way others needed the security of four walls. After dinner, when Lily had been put to bed despite her protests that she wasn't tired, the three adults sat by the fire with small glasses of the whiskey Sam had brought. Thomas and Sam discussed the situation with the local tribes' tensions that were simmering in some areas, peaceful trading in others. "The problem isn't the Indians," Sam said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "It's the promises the government makes and breaks. Hard for a man to trust when he's been lied to consistently." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I've come to the same conclusion working here at the fort. The broken treaties, the corruption, it's a wonder there's any peace at all." The conversation eventually turned to the Ellis family's plans for the future. Thomas explained their decision to remain at Fort Laramie indefinitely, his enthusiasm evident as he described the school he was developing and the community they had found. "It suits you," Sam observed. "Both of you," he added, glancing at Abigail. "It does," she agreed, "though sometimes I miss having land of our own." Thomas smiled fondly at her. "Perhaps someday we'll try again, but for now this is where we're meant to be." As the evening drew to a close, Sam remembered the package he had brought. "Nearly forgot," he said, retrieving it from where he had set it aside. "Something for Lily, thought she might like it." He handed the small bundle to Abigail, "for when she wakes." Abigail unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a beautifully carved set of wooden animals: a deer, a buffalo, a wolf, and a bear, each small enough to fit in the palm of her hand but detailed with remarkable precision. "Sam, these are exquisite," she said, turning the deer over in her hands to admire the craftsmanship. "Did you make them?" He nodded, a faint color touching his cheeks at her praise. "Had time on my hands during the long evenings. Carving passes the time." "You have a gift," Thomas said, examining the buffalo with appreciation. "Lily will treasure these." When it came time for Sam to leave, Thomas insisted on walking with him to the officers' quarters where he had been assigned a room for his stay at the fort. The two men shook hands at the door, and Abigail watched as Thomas said something that made Sam nod seriously in response. After Thomas had gone to check on Lily, who had called out in her sleep, Abigail found herself momentarily alone with Sam by the door. "It was good to see you again," she said softly. "Lily has missed you." Sam's gaze held hers. Only Lily, the question, simple as it was, caught Abigail off guard with its directness. "No," she admitted after a moment. "Not only Lily." Something flickered in his eyes, gratification, perhaps, or relief. "I thought of you both often," he said quietly. "Wondered how you were faring." "We've been well," Abigail assured him. "Thanks in no small part to you." Sam shook his head slightly, dismissing her gratitude as he always had. "You've made a good life here. Ellis is a fortunate man." Before Abigail could respond, Thomas returned, and the moment passed. Sam took his leave with a promise to visit again before his departure, which he expected would be in a few days. Those few days stretched into a week as heavy snowfall delayed Sam's departure. He became a frequent visitor to the Ellis quarters during that time, often joining them for evening meals or spending afternoons helping Thomas with projects around the fort. Lily adored him unreservedly, proudly showing him off to her friends as our Sam, and insisting he tell her stories of his travels. Abigail found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that both troubled and excited her. There was something about Sam's presence that brought a different energy to their home, a sense of the wider world, beyond the fort walls, perhaps, or simply the unique quality of attention he brought to everything he did. One afternoon, while Thomas was teaching and Lily was playing with friends, Abigail encountered Sam near the stables. He was preparing his horse for a short ride to check conditions on the trail, a routine he maintained even during his stay at the fort. "Mind if I join you?" she asked impulsively. "I could use some fresh air." Sam looked surprised but pleased by the request. "Of course, I'll saddle a mount for you." A short while later they rode through the fort gates, the guards nodding respectfully to Sam as they passed. The day was clear and cold, the snow-covered landscape gleaming in the winter sunshine. They rode in companionable silence for a time, following a trail that led to a rise overlooking the surrounding territory. At the crest of the hill, Sam reined in his horse and dismounted, offering a hand to help Abigail down. They stood side by side, looking out over the vast expanse of white plains stretching to the horizon. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Sam said, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Abigail nodded, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "In a harsh way, yes. I never appreciated how beautiful this country could be until I came west." Sam glanced at her. "Yet you missed your home in Illinois." "At first," Abigail admitted. "Everything here was so difficult, so different from what I knew. But now," she gestured at the landscape before them, "now I can't imagine being anywhere else." Sam smiled, one of his rare, genuine smiles that transformed his usually serious features. "It gets in your blood, this country. Changes you." "It does," Abigail agreed. After a moment she asked, "Will you stay at Fort Laramie long?" Sam shook his head. "No. Once the trail's clear, I'll be heading out again. Major Williams has dispatches for Fort Phil Kearny." Abigail nodded, trying to ignore the twinge of disappointment his words evoked. "More mountains and valleys to see. More trails to ride," Sam agreed. He was silent for a moment, then added, "But I find myself thinking of Fort Laramie more often these days. Might be I'll pass this way again before spring." The implication was clear. It wasn't just the fort that drew him back. Abigail looked at him directly, finding his blue eyes already on her face. "You would be welcome," she said softly. "Lily would be delighted." "And you?" Sam asked, his voice equally soft. Abigail hesitated, aware they were approaching dangerous territory. "I would be glad to see you as well." Sam nodded, accepting the careful response. "Your husband is a good man, Abigail. You have a good life here." "I do," she acknowledged. "I'm fortunate in many ways." They stood in silence for a time, each lost in their own thoughts. The unspoken feelings between them hung in the air, acknowledged but contained by the boundaries of honor and circumstance. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. "We should head back. The temperature will drop quickly once the sun starts to set." They rode back to the fort in the same companionable silence with which they had departed, each understanding that some things were better left unsaid. Yet Abigail found a curious peace in that ride, as if the acknowledgement of their connection, however constrained by circumstance, had eased something within her. The next morning brought news that the trails were clearing, and preparations began for Sam's departure. He spent his last evening at Fort Laramie with the Ellis family, Lily insisting on sitting beside him at dinner, and showing him how she could now write her name on her slate. After Lily had been put to bed, extracting a promise from Sam that he would say goodbye before leaving in the morning, the three adults sat by the fire for a final conversation. Thomas, who had grown to genuinely like and respect Sam during his stay, spoke of future plans for the school and invited Sam to visit whenever his travels brought him to Fort Laramie. "You'll always have a place at our table," Thomas assured him. "After what you did for my family, you're as good as kin to us." Sam nodded, accepting the sincere offer with his characteristic quiet dignity. "I appreciate that, Ellis. Might be I'll take you up on it more often than you expect." When it came time for Sam to leave, Thomas excused himself to check on a noise from Lily's room, leaving Abigail and Sam alone by the door once more. "Dawn comes early," Sam said, his voice low. "I should let you rest." Abigail nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to meet his gaze. "Safe travels, Sam." He hesitated, then reached out to touch her hand briefly. "Take care of yourself, Abigail, and that family of yours." "I will," she promised, finally looking up at him. "And you take care on the trail." Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that could never be fully expressed, a connection that had been forged in crisis and strengthened in the days since. "Goodbye, Abigail," Sam said softly. "Until next time," she replied, refusing to say the word goodbye. A small smile touched his lips. "Until next time," he agreed. As promised, Sam stopped by early the next morning to say farewell to Lily, who was unusually solemn as she hugged him goodbye. Abigail and Thomas walked with him to the fort gates, where his horse was saddled and ready for the journey. With a final handshake for Thomas and a nod to Abigail, Sam mounted and rode through the gates, his figure gradually diminishing as he followed the trail north toward Fort Phil Kearny. Life at Fort Laramie continued its steady rhythm after Sam's departure. Winter gave way to spring, bringing new activities and challenges. Thomas's school flourished, and Abigail found herself increasingly involved in the medical care of the fort's inhabitants, her skills growing with practice and guidance from the occasional visiting doctor. Lily thrived in the community, growing taller and more articulate with each passing month. She still played with the wooden animals Sam had carved for her, and occasionally asked when he might return, but with the resilience of childhood, she adapted to his absence. Spring turned to summer, and summer to fall once more. News came occasionally of Sam Pierce reports of dispatches delivered, of guidance provided to Army patrols, of his reputation for reliability and skill in the wilderness. But the man himself did not return to Fort Laramie. Abigail told herself it was for the best. The connection between them, whatever it might have been, was better left unexplored. She had a good life, a loving husband, a thriving daughter. Wanting more would be selfish and foolish. Yet sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, she would take out the wooden horse Sam had carved for her and remember the words he had spoken when he lifted her and Lily from the dusty trail. "Your burden is mine now." Simple words that had meant everything in that moment of desperation. It was on a crisp October day, with leaves turning gold on the cottonwoods along the river, that Major Williams summoned Thomas to his office. Abigail was tending to a soldier with a broken arm when her husband found her, his face pale and his expression troubled. "What is it?" she asked, immediately concerned. "Has something happened?" Thomas nodded, drawing her aside. "It's Pierce. He's been hurt badly from what the major says. They're bringing him in now." Abigail's heart seemed to stop for a moment before racing forward at double speed. "How? What happened?" "Ambush, apparently. He was escorting a survey party near the Bighorn Mountains when they were attacked. The others were killed, but Pierce managed to escape. He's been riding for days, wounded, to bring warning that the survey route isn't safe." "How far away is he?" Abigail asked, already mentally preparing for what might be needed. "Should be at the gates any minute. Major Williams sent out a patrol when the lookout spotted a rider approaching slowly." Thomas hesitated, then added, "The major says it doesn't look good, Abigail. Pierce has lost a lot of blood." Abigail nodded, forcing herself to think practically rather than giving in to the fear clutching at her heart. "I'll need clean water, bandages, my sewing kit for stitches, and whiskey the good kind, not the rot gut they serve at the canteen." By the time Sam was carried through the fort gates, Abigail had prepared a room in the infirmary with everything she might need. She steeled herself for what she might see, but the reality still shocked her. Sam's face was gray beneath his tan, his shirt soaked with blood from a wound in his side. He was conscious but barely, his eyes glazed with pain and exhaustion. "Abigail," he murmured when he saw her, his voice so weak she could hardly hear it. "Don't try to talk," she instructed, already cutting away his shirt to expose the wound. "Save your strength." The injury was serious, a deep knife wound to his left side that had been roughly bandaged but continued to seep blood. Infection had set in, the flesh around the wound hot and inflamed. Abigail worked methodically, cleaning the wound, preparing to stitch it closed. "This will hurt," she warned Sam as she poured whiskey over the open flesh to cleanse it. He nodded once, his jaw clenching as the alcohol burned through the wound. He made no sound as Abigail began to stitch, though sweat beaded on his forehead and his hands gripped the edges of the cot until his knuckles turned white through it all. Thomas assisted silently, handing Abigail what she needed and helping to hold Sam still when necessary. His presence was a comfort, his steady hands and calm demeanor a reminder of why she had fallen in love with him years ago. When the wound was finally closed and bandaged, Abigail turned her attention to Sam's other injuries, a gash on his forehead that also required stitches, bruises that suggested he had fallen or been beaten, and the general exhaustion of a man who had pushed himself beyond normal human endurance. "He needs rest now," she told Thomas and Major Williams, who had come to check on his scout, "and we need to watch for fever. The infection is my greatest concern." "Will he survive?" the Major asked bluntly. Abigail looked at Sam's still form, his breathing shallow but steady. "He's strong and he's survived this long. That counts for a great deal, but the next day or two will be critical." The Major nodded grimly. "Keep me informed. Pierce is one of our best. Hate to lose him." After he left, Thomas placed a gentle hand on Abigail's shoulder. "You should rest too." "You've done all you can for now." Abigail shook her head. "I'll stay with him. Someone needs to monitor his condition." Thomas studied her face, something unreadable in his expression. "I'll bring Lily to see you later and some food. You need to keep up your strength." After he left, Abigail pulled a chair close to Sam's cot and settled in for her vigil. In the quiet of the infirmary, with only Sam's labored breathing for company, she allowed herself to acknowledge the fear she had been suppressing, fear that he might die, that the vital force that was Samuel Pierce might be extinguished. "Don't you dare die," she whispered, taking his hand in hers. "Not after surviving everything else." The hours passed slowly. Abigail changed Sam's bandages, bathed his face with cool water when fever began to rise, and spooned broth between his lips during brief periods of consciousness. Thomas brought Lily to visit as promised, the child unusually subdued at the sight of her friend so gravely injured. "Will Sam get better?" she asked, her small face solemn. "I hope so, sweetheart," Abigail replied honestly. "We're doing everything we can to help him." Night fell and Thomas returned to the infirmary. "You need to sleep, Abigail," he said gently. "I'll watch over him for a few hours." Exhausted, Abigail reluctantly agreed. "Wake me if there's any change at all." Thomas nodded, taking the chair she vacated. "I will now go rest." Abigail returned to their quarters, checked on Lily, who was already asleep, and lay down fully clothed on their bed. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as her mind replayed the events of the day and worried over what the night might bring. When she returned to the infirmary just before dawn, she found Thomas sitting where she had left him, his expression thoughtful as he watched the wounded man. "How is he?" Abigail asked anxiously. "Fever rose for a while, then broke about an hour ago," Thomas reported. He's been restless, talking in his sleep. What did he say? Abigail asked, moving to check Sam's bandages. Thomas hesitated. Your name, mostly, and something about burdens. Abigail's hands stilled for a moment before continuing their work. He saved our lives, she said quietly. That creates a bond. Yes, Thomas agreed, his voice equally quiet. I imagine it does. The day passed with small signs of improvement. Sam's fever remained at bay, and he woke for longer periods, though he was still weak and confused at times. By evening, Abigail was cautiously optimistic that the worst had passed. You had us worried, she told Sam during one of his lucid periods, as she helped him drink some broth. Sorry about that, he replied, his voice hoarse but stronger than it had been. Didn't plan on getting stabbed. Abigail smiled despite herself. I should hope not. It's terribly inconvenient for everyone involved. A ghost of his old smile touched Sam's lips. I'll try to be more considerate next time. See that you are, Abigail said, adjusting his pillow. And let's avoid a next time altogether, shall we? Over the following days, Sam's condition improved steadily. The infection receded, and his strength began to return, though he remained weak and in pain from his injuries. Abigail continued to oversee his care, with Thomas and occasionally Lily helping when they could. It was during one of these visits, about a week after Sam's arrival at the fort, that Thomas observed something that changed everything. Abigail was changing Sam's bandages, her movements gentle and practiced. Sam watched her work, his expression one of complete trust, and something Thomas recognized because he had seen it in his own face when he looked at Abigail. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Thomas sat with Abigail by their fire. I need to ask you something, he said, his voice serious but not accusing. About Pierce. Abigail tensed, uncertain what was coming. What about him? Thomas met her gaze directly. Are you in love with him? The question, asked so plainly, stunned Abigail. She opened her mouth to deny it automatically, then closed it again, unwilling to lie to the man who had been her partner for so long. I don't know, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I care for him deeply. I can't deny that. But I've never acted on those feelings, Thomas. I would never betray you that way. Thomas nodded slowly, accepting her honesty. I believe you, but I see the way he looks at you, Abigail, and the way you look at him when you think no one is watching. Tears filled Abigail's eyes. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I love you, Thomas. You're my husband, Lily's father. I know you love me, Thomas said gently, but I'm beginning to wonder if that's enough. What are you saying? Abigail asked, fear creeping into her voice. Thomas sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm saying that I've had a lot of time to think since Pierce came back into our lives, about what makes a marriage work, about what we both deserve. Thomas, he held up a hand to stop her. Let me finish, please. When I thought you and Lily were dead, it nearly destroyed me. Then to find you alive, to have you back, it felt like a miracle. But the truth is, things haven't been right between us for a long time, have they? Even before the raid. Abigail couldn't deny it. Their marriage had been strained for months before the attack on their homestead, worn down by the hardships of frontier life and the gradual realization that they wanted different things from life. We've been happy here at the fort, she said, clinging to that truth. Happier, yes, Thomas agreed, but not truly happy, not in the way we should be. He reached out to take her hand. I've been offered a position teaching at a school in Denver, a real school with proper classrooms and resources. Denver, Abigail repeated, trying to absorb this unexpected news. When did this happen? The offer came last month. I've been considering it, trying to decide what's best for all of us. Thomas squeezed her hand gently. It's the opportunity I've been waiting for, Abigail, a chance to do what I'm truly meant to do. Abigail nodded slowly, understanding dawning. You want to accept? I do, Thomas admitted. But I won't go without Lily. She needs her father. The implication was clear. Thomas was suggesting a separation, one that would take their daughter with him. The thought of being parted from Lily was like a physical pain in Abigail's chest. You would take her from me? She asked, her voice breaking. Thomas shook his head. No, that's not what I'm proposing. I'm suggesting that you need time to figure out what and who you truly want, and Lily needs stability while you do that. So you're leaving me, Abigail said, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. I'm giving you a choice, Thomas corrected gently. Come with us to Denver, commit to our marriage fully, and we'll make a new start together. Or stay here, see if what you feel for Pierce is real and lasting, and we'll figure out an arrangement for Lily that works for everyone. Abigail stared at him, overwhelmed by the decision he was placing before her. This isn't fair, Thomas. Perhaps not, he agreed. But neither is living in a marriage where one person's heart is divided. The conversation ended there, both of them too emotional to continue. Abigail lay awake most of the night, Thomas's words echoing in her mind. Was he right? Had she been fooling herself, thinking she could ignore her feelings for Sam and continue as before? The next day, Abigail went to the infirmary as usual to check on Sam. He was sitting up now, able to feed himself and moving around a bit, though still far from fully recovered. You look troubled, he observed as she checked his bandages. Abigail tried to smile, just tired. It's been a long week. Sam caught her hand as she worked, forcing her to look at him. What's wrong, Abigail, and don't tell me it's nothing. I know you better than that. The concern in his eyes nearly undid her composure. How could she tell him that her marriage was falling apart, partly because of feelings she had developed for him? It seemed impossibly selfish and unfair to burden him with that knowledge while he was still recovering. Thomas has been offered a teaching position in Denver, she said instead, sharing only part of the truth. He wants to accept. Sam nodded slowly. It's a good opportunity for a man with his skills. Will you go with him? The direct question caught Abigail off guard. I don't know. We're still discussing it. Sam studied her face, seeing more than she wanted him to. Is there something else? Something you're not telling me? Abigail hesitated, torn between honesty and caution. It's complicated, she said finally. Life usually is, Sam replied, releasing her hand. But if there's anything I can do to help, you know I would. The sincerity in his voice made her decision even more difficult. What did she truly want? The safe, familiar life with Thomas, a man she respected and cared for deeply. Or the unknown path with Sam, a man who stirred her heart in ways she hadn't thought possible. I know, she said softly. Thank you. The following days were a blur of conflicting emotions for Abigail. Thomas moved forward with his plans, accepting the position in Denver and making arrangements for their departure at the end of the month. He was kind but firm in his resolve, giving Abigail the space to make her decision while proceeding as if she would choose to come with him. Sam continued to recover, gradually regaining his strength. He spent time with Lily whenever Abigail brought her to visit, but seemed to sense the tension between Abigail and Thomas and kept a respectful distance from their family concerns. It was Lily who unwittingly brought matters to a head. During one of their visits to the infirmary, she announced to Sam, "We're going to Denver. Papa's going to be a teacher in a big school." Sam's gaze flew to Abigail's face. "Is that so?" he asked mildly. "Papa says there are lots of children there for me to play with," Lily continued, oblivious to the undercurrents between the adults. "It sounds like a fine place," Sam agreed, still watching Abigail. "When do you leave?" "End of the month," Abigail replied, unable to meet his eyes. "Thomas has accepted the position." After Lily had been distracted by a soldier delivering meals to the infirmary, Sam spoke quietly to Abigail. "You've made your decision, then." It wasn't a question, but Abigail answered anyway. "No, not yet." Sam frowned, confused. "But Lily seems to think." "Thomas has decided," Abigail interrupted. "He's taking Lily to Denver. Whether I go with them is still undetermined." Understanding dawned in Sam's eyes. "He's giving you a choice." Abigail nodded, finally meeting his gaze. "A choice I never wanted to have to make." Sam was silent for a long moment. "What do you want, Abigail?" The question, asked so simply, deserved an honest answer. "I don't know," she admitted. "I want my daughter. I want a life that feels right. I want—" She hesitated, then continued softly, "I want not to hurt anyone I care about." Sam reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "Sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes, no matter what you choose, someone gets hurt." "That doesn't make it easier," Abigail said, fighting back tears. "No," Sam agreed. "It doesn't." They were interrupted by Lily's return, and the conversation was left unfinished. But that evening, as Abigail prepared dinner in their quarters, Thomas broached the subject again. "Have you had a chance to think about what we discussed?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. Abigail nodded, setting down the knife she was using to cut vegetables. "I have, but I'm no closer to a decision." Thomas sighed. "Time is running short, Abigail. I leave for Denver in 2 weeks." "I know," she said, frustration edging her voice. "But you're asking me to choose between my husband and my daughter, or—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Or the man you've fallen in love with," Thomas completed gently. "You can say it, Abigail. I'm not angry. Hurt, yes, but not angry." Abigail turned to face him fully. "How can you be so calm about this? How can you act as if this is a reasonable choice to make?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "Because I've had time to accept what's happening. I've seen it coming since Pierce carried you and Lily into our lives." "Nothing happened between us," Abigail insisted. "Nothing improper." "I believe you," Thomas assured her. "But something changed for you, didn't it? Something fundamental about how you saw your life, your future." Abigail couldn't deny it. From the moment Sam had lifted her and Lily from the dusty trail, saying those simple words, "Your burden is mine now," something had shifted inside her. It wasn't just gratitude or the natural attachment that forms between people who face danger together. It was a recognition, soul deep and undeniable, that here was a man who understood her in ways Thomas never had, despite years of marriage. "I don't want to lose you or Lily," she said finally, "but I don't want to live a lie either." Thomas nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. "That's all I needed to hear, Abigail. You've made your choice, even if you haven't admitted it to yourself yet." Before Abigail could respond, Lily burst into the room, excited about something she had seen in the parade ground. The serious conversation was set aside, but Thomas's words lingered in Abigail's mind. Had she already made her choice without realizing it? And if so, what did that mean for her future, for her relationship with her daughter? The answer came to her the next morning as she watched Lily playing with the wooden animals Sam had carved for her. The child was creating an elaborate story about the deer and the wolf becoming friends despite their differences, her imagination transforming the simple toys into characters with complex relationships. "Mama, look," Lily exclaimed, holding up the wolf. "He's protecting the deer because they're a family now." In that moment, with her daughter's innocent wisdom before her, Abigail knew what she had to do. She found Thomas in the small room he used as an office, preparing lessons for his final days at the fort. "I've made my decision," she said without preamble. Thomas looked up, his expression resigned. "And I can't go to Denver with you," Abigail said, her voice breaking despite her resolve. "But I can't be separated from Lily either." Thomas set down his pen. "What are you suggesting?" "Let me come to Denver with you, not as your wife, but as Lily's mother. We can find a way to live separately but still both be present in her life." Abigail took a deep breath. "It's not ideal, I know, but it would allow us both to be with her, to watch her grow." Thomas considered her proposal thoughtfully. "And Pierce, where does he fit into this plan?" "I don't know," Abigail admitted. "I haven't spoken to him about any of this. For all I know, he doesn't feel the same way." A small smile touched Thomas's lips. "I think we both know that's not true." Abigail flushed. "Even so, I'm not making this decision based on what may or may not happen with Sam. I'm making it because I need to be honest with you, with myself, with Lily." Thomas was silent for a long moment, weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we'll try it your way. We'll both go to Denver, find separate living arrangements, and share Lily's care. It won't be easy, but it's better than the alternatives." Relief washed over Abigail, along with gratitude for Thomas's understanding. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Now she faced the more daunting task, speaking to Sam. She found him in the infirmary, packing the few belongings he had accumulated during his recovery. He looked up as she entered, his expression guarded. "Going somewhere?" Abigail asked, surprised by his preparations. Sam nodded. "Major Williams has cleared me for light duty. Thought I'd move back to the barracks." "Oh." Abigail wasn't sure why this news disappointed her. "That's good. It means you're healing well." "Thanks to your care," Sam acknowledged. He continued packing for a moment, then asked without looking at her, "Have you decided about Denver?" Abigail took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm going with Thomas and Lily." Sam's hands stilled for a moment before resuming their task. "I see. That's for the best, I'm sure." The resignation in his voice broke something in Abigail. "No, you don't understand. I'm going, but not as Thomas's wife. We're separating. I'll be there for Lily, but Thomas and I." She trailed off, unsure how to explain the arrangement they had agreed upon. Sam turned to face her fully, confusion and something like hope in his eyes. "You're leaving him." "We're leaving each other," Abigail corrected gently. "It's a mutual decision. We both recognize that our marriage isn't what it should be." "Because of me," Sam said, a statement rather than a question. Abigail shook her head. "Not entirely. There were problems before you came into our lives. Your arrival just clarified things that we'd both been avoiding." Sam was silent for a long moment, processing her words. "What does this mean, Abigail? For you, for us?" It was the question Abigail had been asking herself since making her decision. "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "I know I care for you deeply. I know there's something between us that I've never experienced before. But I also know that my daughter has to be my priority right now." Sam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course she does. I would never expect otherwise." Abigail took a step closer to him. "What I'm trying to say, Sam, is that I don't know what the future holds, but I want to find out. If you're willing to be patient, to give me time to settle Lily in Denver and establish this new arrangement with Thomas." "I've waited my whole life to find someone like you," Sam interrupted softly. "I can wait a little longer." The simple sincerity in his words touched Abigail deeply. "You make it sound so easy." Sam shook his head. "Not easy, but worth it." He reached out to take her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "When do you leave for Denver?" 2 weeks, Abigail replied. "Thomas has arranged for a military escort to accompany us as far as the stage route." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "I'll need to speak with Major Williams, see if he can spare me for a while." "What are you thinking?" Abigail asked, hope rising within her. "I'm thinking that Denver might need a reliable scout," Sam replied, a smile beginning to form. "Or at least the territory around it. Seems to me there's work for a man with my skills just about anywhere in the West." Abigail's heart lightened at his words. "You would do that?" Move to Denver. I would do that and more, Sam said simply, if it meant being near you and Lily. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparations and adjustments. Thomas, true to his word, worked with Abigail to plan their new living arrangement in Denver. They agreed that Abigail would find lodgings near the school where Thomas would teach, allowing Lily to move easily between her parents. Sam spoke with Major Williams, who reluctantly granted him an extended leave to escort the Ellis family to Denver. The Major seemed to sense there was more to the arrangement than a simple escort mission, but he asked no questions, merely extracting a promise from Sam to return to Fort Laramie for at least one more assignment before making any permanent changes to his employment. Lily, with the adaptability of childhood, accepted the explanation that Mama and Papa would have separate houses in Denver, but that she would spend time with both of them. She was more excited about the fact that Sam would be coming with them, innocently unaware of the complex adult relationships shifting around her. The day of departure arrived clear and cold, with the promise of winter in the air. The wagon that would take them to the stage route was loaded with their belongings, and a small escort of soldiers prepared to accompany them through the potentially dangerous territory between Fort Laramie and the more settled areas to the south. As they prepared to leave, Major Williams approached Sam with a final word. "Pierce," he said gruffly, "you're a damn fine scout, best I've worked with. If things don't work out in Denver, remember you've always got a place here." Sam nodded, appreciating the sentiment behind the Major's words. "Thank you, sir. I'll keep that in mind." The journey to Denver passed without incident, the military escort ensuring their safety through the wilderness. When they reached the stage route, they bid farewell to the soldiers and continued by stagecoach, the four of them, Abigail, Thomas, Lily, and Sam, creating a strange but functional family unit. Denver was a revelation to Abigail. Though still a frontier town in many ways, it boasted amenities she had almost forgotten existed: proper stores, a hotel with real beds, streets laid out in orderly patterns. It was a place where civilization was taking firm root, a sharp contrast to the isolated existence they had known at their homestead. Thomas quickly found suitable lodgings near the school where he would teach, and with Sam's help, Abigail secured a small house just 2 streets away. The arrangement was unconventional, but the growing city of Denver had room for all kinds of families and living situations. As they settled into their new lives, the arrangement that had seemed so awkward in theory began to work in practice. Lily split her time between her parents' homes, thriving in the stability provided by both. Thomas threw himself into his teaching, finding fulfillment in the work he was truly meant to do. And Sam, who had initially planned to find work as a scout in the surrounding territory, discovered an unexpected opportunity. "The city marshal is looking for deputies," he told Abigail one evening as they sat on the porch of her small house, Lily already asleep inside. "Says they need men who know the territory and can handle themselves in difficult situations." Abigail studied his face in the fading light. "Is that something you'd want to do? It seems very different from scouting." Sam considered the question thoughtfully. "It is different. More settled, for one thing. But there's something appealing about helping to build safety in a growing place like this. And it would mean staying in Denver, not disappearing into the wilderness for weeks at a time." The implication was clear: it would mean being near Abigail and Lily consistently, not just during brief visits between scouting assignments. "I think you'd make an excellent deputy," Abigail said softly. "You have a natural sense of justice, and people trust you instinctively." Sam smiled, one of his rare, genuine smiles that transformed his usually serious face. "Do they now?" "They do," Abigail confirmed. "I should know. I trusted you with my life and my daughters before I even knew your name." Sam reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "That was the day my life changed, you know. Finding you on that trail, carrying Lily with the last of your strength. I knew then that I'd never be the same." Abigail intertwined her fingers with his. "Mine changed too. When you lifted us both and said those words, 'Your burden is mine now,' something shifted inside me. It was as if everything that came before was preparation for that moment." They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Their relationship had developed slowly over the months since arriving in Denver, both of them conscious of the need for care and respect in the unusual situation they found themselves in. Thomas, with a generosity of spirit that Abigail would always be grateful for, had accepted Sam's place in their reconfigured family with grace. The two men had developed a cautious friendship based on mutual respect and their shared concern for Lily's happiness. "I spoke with Thomas today," Sam said after a while, "asked for his blessing." Abigail turned to him, surprised. "His blessing? For what?" Sam shifted to face her directly, his expression serious. "For this." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a carved wooden ring, polished to a soft gleam in the twilight. "I'm not a wealthy man, Abigail, can't offer you gold or silver, but I can offer you this, made with my own hands, as a symbol of what I feel for you." Abigail's breath caught as she realized what was happening. "Sam, I love you," he said simply. "Have from the moment I saw you carrying Lily across that dusty plain, refusing to give up despite everything. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Tears filled Abigail's eyes as she looked at the ring he offered, a simple band with an intricate pattern carved around its circumference. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Like you," Sam replied. "Strong and beautiful and more precious than anything in this world." Abigail met his gaze, her heart full to bursting. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I'll have you, Samuel Pierce. Your burdens and your joys, all of it." Sam slipped the wooden ring onto her finger, then leaned forward to kiss her, their first kiss, full of promise and the culmination of feelings that had grown between them since that fateful day on the Wyoming plains. When they parted, Abigail rested her forehead against his. "What did Thomas say?" "When you asked for his blessing," Sam smiled. "He said he'd known this was coming since Fort Laramie, said if anyone deserved happiness it was you, and that he trusted me to take care of you and Lily." "He's a good man," Abigail said softly. "We're fortunate, all of us, to have found a way through this that honors what we feel." In the spring of 1877, Abigail Ellis became Abigail Pierce in a small ceremony attended by Thomas, Lily, and the friends they had made in Denver. Sam had indeed taken the position as deputy marshal, his steady presence and quiet authority making him respected throughout the growing city. They built their home on the outskirts of Denver, close enough for Lily to move easily between her parents, but with enough space for the horses Sam insisted were essential. Thomas remained a constant in Lily's life, his relationship with Abigail evolving into a friendship based on mutual respect and their shared love for their daughter. And on summer evenings, when the western sky blazed with colors no painter could capture, Sam and Abigail would sit on their porch, watching Lily play in the yard that stretched toward the distant mountains. Sometimes Sam would take out his knife and a piece of wood, carving animals for Lily or decorative items for their home. And sometimes, when the mood was right, he would tell stories of his days as a scout, of the vast wilderness he had traversed, and of the day he had found a woman carrying her child across the plains. "Your burden is mine now," he would say, drawing Abigail close. then and always. And Abigail, nestled against the strength that had carried her through her darkest hour, would smile and respond, "And yours is mine." In those moments, with the life they had built surrounding them, they knew that what had begun as rescue had transformed into something far more precious, a love forged in hardship, tested by circumstance, and ultimately triumphant against all odds. For Abigail and Sam, the journey that had started on a dusty trail in the Wyoming Territory had led them home, not to a place, but to each other, where burdens shared became joys multiplied, and where the promise made in a moment of desperation became the foundation for a lifetime of love.